Let's pray together. God is closer than my thoughts. God is closer than my feelings. God is closer than my breath. And when I walk for God as God. When I breathe for God as God. When I pray for God as God. And in everything I do this as God. So knowing this, I can trust. I can just relax and trust into this powerful force, knowing that everything is guided and that God is more here where I am in this moment than anywhere, than any time. So I can trust into any situation. I can handle anything, any obstacle that comes my way. I'm grateful for this awareness. And so it is.
Ooh, yeah. Pour yourself in me, pour yourself into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour yourself in me, pour yourself into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour your joy in me, pour your joy into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour your joy in me, pour your joy into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour your love in me, pour your love into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour your love in me, pour your love into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour yourself in me, pour yourself into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit, pour yourself in me, pour yourself into my heart. Oh, wonderful Spirit. Oh, wonderful Spirit.
Let's take this time now to go into a mindful moment, a space of meditation by closing your eyes, letting yourself sink into the support of where you're sitting, coming into this present moment, this sacred moment in time with your awareness and with your breath. And as we're connecting to the earth today and celebrating it and honoring it, as you breathe in, feel yourself breathing in that air, that oxygen, that life that has circulated around the whole planet to come right into your body. Breathing in the air that has been given to you by trees, maybe in Africa or Australia or the Amazon or our redwood forest. giving us that oxygen. Feeling that connection to the planet as you breathe in and as you breathe out, feeling your gratitude. As you're present here and you're breathing, you may feel the beating of your heart, circulating the blood in your veins that comes from the sacred waters of our planet. The glaciers that have become streams and rivers, pristine alpine lakes, and flowing into our oceans. As you're breathing now and feeling that circulation of your own blood, the lifeblood of the planet as that sacred water right within you and every cell of your being, breathe into that. And breathing out our gratitude. And feeling the very substance of your body, the bones, the flesh, knowing that that is the substance of the earth. It has come from the beings that have given their lives so that we might live. That our body is literally made of the substance of this planet, given to us so abundantly. Breathe in our palpable connection with the planet through our very own body, our very own flesh, and breathe out that gratitude. See if you can feel by your very breath, your very blood and flesh, that you are one with this planet. She is within you, and you are a part of her. You and that redwood tree, you and that rose maybe in your garden, that you and the flowing creek are all of the same substance, which is both of this planet and of divine substance. Everything here is a unique and beautiful manifestation of that one infinite presence within you, within the tree, within the creek, within the flower. As we take our last few breaths for this meditation, we can continue this feeling of connection, of oneness, and of gratitude for the planet with every breath that you're conscious of, with every beating of your heart, with every movement of your sacred body. One more deep breath here. And then as you begin to open your eyes, bring that awareness of your connection with all that is, with everything that you see, and with everyone here in our collective at unity.
Thank you, Connie.
Glad to be with you on this time of the year where we bring some conscious awareness to our planet and to honoring and celebrating her. And I'm going to talk with you today about the intersection of our spiritual evolution, our spiritual awakening, both individually and as a collective species, and our planetary well-being. And this journey that I see us taking is a journey from separation back to oneness. And I don't think I need to tell anyone here that things are changing on the planet. Our beautiful home is in a bit of trouble. And we know that things are changing in our climate, that we may not see everything with our naked eye right now happening where we live, but we have experienced drought. We have experienced wildfires here. There is toxicity now in the water and the soil and the air. We have plastics piling up in the oceans. We even have plastics in our own bloodstream. It's been found recently that we have microplastics within us. There's many, many things going on in the planet that are a concern for our species and for the planet, for nature itself. And I feel that we've come to this place from this separation that has been created between us and nature. Let's take a little look back in history and how that happened, because from what we understand from historical artifacts, but also from indigenous wisdom that's been passed to us from elders that are still in communities that are connected to the earth. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors, most of the peoples on the earth lived in a symbiotic relationship with nature. We followed the cycles of the seasons. We followed the pathways of the stars across the skies. And we understood that our survival depended on being in harmony with the natural world. We didn't accumulate a lot. We didn't gather a lot of stuff, a lot of the material things. It wasn't a great value in those days, in those early societies, to have a lot of stuff. The earth was abundant. We didn't really need a lot of stuff. And we were probably mostly nomadic back then anyway, so having a lot of stuff was a burden. But the earth was abundant and she provided everything that we needed and more. And life was more simple. These ancient peoples, our own ancestors, understood that the planet didn't belong to us. Rather, we belong to her. That we are an intrinsic part of nature and that we didn't own land or resources. They were shared amongst us and the animals and the plants. Everything belonged to everything, and that we were relatives of the flora and the trees and the four-leggeds and the insects and winged creatures and the fishes and the reptiles. We were all, even the rocks and the soil and the rivers were our brothers and sisters. Now, at some point about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago or so, that started to change. There's a number of reasons why that I couldn't go into right now, but things shifted and power and accumulation of material goods became more of a focus. We began to look at nature as a resource to take, as well as people as resources that we could use and dominate and take. We shifted from the community focus, more the tribal focus perhaps, to more and more a sense of individual focus and more dividing up of nations and us versus them, rather than the collective self that we would often have in a large community, in a tribe. It became more of life about owning things, getting what we needed, what was ours. And anthropocentrism emerged. Anthropocentrism, meaning that humans became the only species that really mattered. We became the most important. It was all focused around us and our human beings, our human communities. It's part of actually our unconscious assumptions today. It's not really our fault. It's sort of been passed down to us through generations to think of us as, at least here in the Western culture, as we're the species that matters on the planet. And we're the most important, and everything else, well, we might help take care of it, but we could use those resources. We can take that land, we can cut down those trees, we can take over that habitat. So this then evolved a little bit more, a couple 100 to 300 years ago, into what one person, Joanna Macy, who has been really emerged as a teacher in my life the last couple of years. She's an eco-psychologist, a Buddhist scholar, and she has created a body of work called The Work That Reconnects, which is very much about reconnecting us to the planet. She calls this the Industrial Growth Society. So the Industrial Growth Society is pretty much what we're used to here in the modern world, focused on business, on industry, on profits over people and planet, on accumulation of wealth, material goods, power, and power over others, taking resources and taking from others sometimes, hyper individualism. You know, we have the most wealthy people on the planet have far more than even a large chunk of the rest of the population. Individuals taking so much, accumulating so much. This Industrial Growth Society is focused on the continuous increase of sales and market share, right? More consumption. We're looked as consumers rather than beings, divine beings, brothers and sisters. And that there's expected to be expanded growth in these areas, right? Continually growing and growing in profits and market shares and sales and consumption without limitation. I mean, where does that stop? And if you think about this, I mean, this is an increased use of resources with this kind of model, this Industrial Growth Society model that we're living under primarily right now. It's very much focused on taking and not giving back. It's not part of a reciprocal ecosystem. And you can see that this is not sustainable. And it's not really even possible after a certain point. That this kind of model cannot continue unlimited. It's dependent on continual use of finite resources we have here on the planet. It's also contingent on increase in population, because to increase profits and to increase consuming, sooner or later, I mean, people can't continue to buy more and more and more. We need more people to buy more, and that's not sustainable either. So you can imagine that if nature worked in this way, of trying to take over and get more and more and more for one organism, we'd have a big problem. I mean, just imagine if you planted something in your garden that acted in this way and wanted to take over your entire yard and use up all the nutrients from the soil and all the water and take all the resources and take over all the space. You'd have kudzu. Anyone know what kudzu is? You ever been to the South? Like North Carolina, Georgia, those areas, and kudzu is a vine that was brought over from somewhere in Asia. I'm not sure where, because they thought, oh, it would grow well here, and well, yeah, it sure did grow well there. It takes over like large swaths of land, and it's extremely hard to keep under control. It's taken out of its natural ecosystem and put in one that doesn't have any animals that eat it, or so we, as a species, we're becoming like kudzu. It's not a good thing, is it? Right? It's not sustainable. We need to shift to what Joanna Macy calls a life-sustaining civilization. A life-sustaining civilization. All right. So the shift from the focus on me and I and mine, the individual separate, all as separate beings from each other, all needing to get what we need, right? And a return to the we with a new expanded consciousness that's integrating our uniqueness as individuals, but with our collective oneness with the whole planet, with the ecosystem. Now, Joanna Macy she's not only a teacher of the work that reconnects, that helps us heal what's happening here on the planet and take action to restore our ecosystems and restore health and well-being to nature. But she's also a Buddhist scholar. And there's a term in Buddhism that's really helpful in understanding our shift from this sense of separation and hyper individuality and the problems with our industrial growth society to this life-sustaining civilization and oneness with all life. And one of those principles from Buddhism is called anatta. Anatta, A-N-A-T-T-A. And anatta is the Buddhist teaching that there is no separate or permanent self. There's no separate or permanent self. This is a little hard for us in Western culture to be willing to consider because we're so focused on hyper individualism. In Eastern culture, it's a little bit easier to get. That's, Buddhist philosophy, right, has come from the East because they're more focused on a bit on the collective than we are here in the West. But what's interesting about anatta, about the idea that there's no separate or permanent self, is that it is inclusive of being unique. We can still be unique, but not a separate being. As I was talking about in our meditation, there's really no possible way that we can actually be completely separate. It's an illusion that we've been given. In fact, some of you may have read the book My Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor. Sound familiar to anybody? You might even had her come and teach a workshop here at Unity. But it's a fascinating book. And if I'm remembering it correctly, she had a stroke on the left side of her brain, that logical, rational side. And what she experienced in living in the right side of the brain for a while it, she gives great TED Talks too, exactly. Before her brain kind of created its new pathways of reconnection, she experienced everything as energy. She saw everything as this flowing and interconnected energy around and within her and everyone and everything. That is true. That is true. We don't see that because we are raised to not perceive that. We're raised to start to see in more of a left brain way, and we've disconnected from or lost our ability in that very right brain way to be able to perceive the interconnectedness of everything as energy. And back to this principle of unique but not separate from anatta, the no separate self, is that we're still unique beings. Each of us, none of us look the same, we don't dress the same, right? We have our unique personalities, but we're still not separate. We can't possibly be separate. If we were actually really fully separate beings, we'd be particles floating out in space, right? Because we're dependent on the waters and the air and the food that comes from the soil. We are made of the same matter as the tree, and I'm looking at outside my window, and the squirrels out in that tree, and the waters flowing through the creeks. We have just a different configuration of it. We've got the carbon and the nitrogen and oxygen, all that within us, and we're all interdependent. And when we start to live thinking that we're not and that we're separate, that's when we start degrading the planet and acting like it's an object and a resource rather than a part of us and we're a part of it. So Joanna Macy brings together this teaching from Buddhism of there's no separate or permanent self with systems theory. Systems theory is an interdisciplinary theory about the nature of complex systems in nature, in the wild, in society, and in science. And from a systems view, from a systems theory view, there is no logical or scientific basis for construing one part of the experience world as me and the rest as other, because everything is interdependent. I'll say that again. There's no logical or scientific basis for construing one part of the experienced world as me and the rest as other. The indigenous peoples know this and knew this for millennia. We in the Western world have been slow to realize this, to understand this, that we are all part of a whole, that we're inseparable from it. We've cultivated this false sense of an individual self in Western society. We still have that uniqueness. Like yesterday I was sitting out in my front lawn and looking at a vine, a blackberry vine that grows along my fence, and the blossoms coming out on it. And each one of them is unique. Each one of them is a little bit different, but they can't exist separate from the vine. And the vine cannot exist separate from the earth. If we pulled up the vine, it would die, right? If we cut one of the blossoms off, we might enjoy it for a little while, like we do like a rose we might cut from our bush. We'll enjoy it for a few days in a vase. It can't exist outside of its interconnectedness with the whole ecosystem. We can't either, but we act like we can. We act like we can. We tend to believe that, the houses that we live in that might be made of concrete and steel or wood, but covered by plaster, we can't even see really the hint of nature that it came from. Even the plastics that we have, the plastic that's made of my phone, along with other things. It doesn't seem like it's from nature, but honestly, it's from petroleum. And where's petroleum from? It came from deep in the earth, in the soil, and in the rock that was created over millions of years by processes in the earth. Our entire lives are intricately interconnected and interwoven and dependent on the earth. We can't be a separate self. Out of necessity, we are interwoven. And when we start to understand our interconnectedness and our oneness with the planet, then we start to treat the planet as a part of us and care for her, every part of her, and every species on the planet and every culture on the planet as part of us, because we not only treat, for example, trees as resources or land as resources, we treat people sometimes as resources. We think, oh, there are certain people that we can sort of dismiss or discount or ignore. We can put our trash dump near them. We can put our factory that spews toxins into the air, into the waters near them. So our interconnectedness, our oneness needs to be amongst all people and all species and in all the elements, the rocks, the soil, because they're all dependent on one another. This is our planetary awakening. And it's capturing some of our development as human beings. I mean, our development of our individuality has been part of our evolution, but it's not the end. A lot of theories of human development sort of end with the individual becoming self-sufficient and knowing who they are, which is great. I mean, that's been helpful. It's been a helpful part of our conscious evolution, but there's another part of that. And as human beings, even in our own individual life cycles, we go through this evolutionary process of starting with, when we come into life, when we're born, in the womb, we are in unconscious oneness. We're in unconscious oneness. The fetus does not understand that it's in the womb of the mother. It's all just experience. It's all just, it's not even, this is me, because there's no sense of me. It's just all one. We're born into the world, and infants, according to what scientists can understand, don't understand separation between mother and father and baby. Like, it's just all part of them. They're still in that right brain, right? Of seeing everything as energy and interconnected. So as human beings, we start with unconscious oneness, because we don't know that we're in oneness. And then we evolve into unconscious separation. The 2-year-old doesn't really quite understand what is me and what is mommy or daddy or brother or sister, but it gets that they're different, but it doesn't really understand who they are. It's not in conscious separation yet. It's in unconscious separation. It's starting to go through, that period of time where they're toddlers, and they're like by mommy, and then they go away, and they're like, oh wait, no, there's mommy is actually separate. I got to run back to mommy. That's unconscious separation. They're starting to get the idea that they're separate, but they don't quite understand it. And then we go through later in childhood and adolescence and young adulthood, we go through this development of conscious separation, conscious individuality, developing ourselves as a human being. Okay, who am I? What do I feel? What do I need? What do I want in life? What is my purpose? Who am I really? That's our conscious individuation. But it doesn't end there. And this is very much, by the way, a Western model of development. We might hear something different from indigenous peoples or from people that live in Asia, for example. But it doesn't end there at conscious separation. That's the problem that we've gotten into. Because when everyone sees everyone as separate, and everything is separate from everything else, and we don't treat ourselves as one with each other, we don't treat ourselves as part of the ecosystem, we don't give reciprocally, we just take what we need and then assume that it's always going to be there in nature. So then our next evolution, and this is where we're standing on the precipice of our spiritual evolution, and where we need to evolve as a society, as a culture, as a species, the human species, is now to conscious oneness. Conscious oneness, where we're aware we've come from this place of separation and realize this isn't real, and it also doesn't serve us. It's hurting our planet. We're hurting each other, right? We have war going on. We're hurting each other because of this conscious separation we created, and we need to circle back now to oneness, but from awareness, from consciously knowing we are truly all divine beings, right? In the reading today from the Daily Word, everything is a manifestation of the divine. And we are not separate from that. We are all part of that. We're all part of that, literally, physically. Our body and our soul, our spirit, is all part of that one infinite presence that has created everything. If we start to see the planet as a part of us and us as a part of the planet, then if trees are getting cut down, we'll feel like it's a part of ourselves. If our own arm was getting cut, we would do everything to protect that, right? To prevent that harm, to heal it. Then we would act the same way with forests being cut down, with people being bombed, right? They're part of us and we're part of them. We're returning to conscious oneness. Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss coined the term ecological self. I think that's where we're coming to now in our human evolution. That our ecological self is a shift. It's a spiritual awakening where we're changing the way we experience ourselves through an ever widening process of identification. So rather than how we have identified ourselves through this very narrow lens of just inside this bag of skin, or just this personality, or just this one individual spirit. That our self, in becoming our ecological self, extends further and further beyond the separate ego, and includes more and more of the phenomenal world, more and more of nature, more and more of everything around us, that we are a part of that tree and that tree is one with us. So that the protection of nature is felt and perceived as the protection of our very selves. And it absolutely is. The survival of our species depends on this shift, because otherwise we'll just use up all our resources, won't we? Our body is the body of the earth. Our spirit is the spirit of the planet. And it's not just for us to survive as a species or to save other species, to return to this ecological self, this process of conscious oneness that we are being called to, that we need to embark upon, is also to rediscover the immense joy of interconnectedness. To no longer be alone as a solitary human, or even as a small community of humans versus nature. You know, we tend to think of nature as out there. We go drive to it. We take some pictures. Isn't this beautiful? This amazing place I was just in. And then we leave and we come back to here when we think this is not nature in our house or in our city. And we disconnect ourselves. This return to conscious oneness is to rediscover the immense joy of interconnectedness, to no longer be alone, to become one with nature, to rediscover our aliveness that we so long for in our disconnected society. You know, another result of this separation that we have been through, that we have created over the centuries and millennia, especially in the last few decades, has been an increase in anxiety and depression, because we've become more and more disconnected from each other, from spirit, and from the very planet that sustains us and that is our home. We long to be reconnected. We long for this joy of interconnectedness. We long to rediscover the feeling of belonging here, belonging to planet Earth. We belong to her like family. Go out into the woods. Go sit down by the ocean, or swim in it, or go up into the mountains. Sit there for a half hour, for a day. Maybe go spend a few days and just sit and immerse and be there. Be out there in the forest. And what we will find, even if you just sit there for a half hour, maybe even for 5 minutes, but if you really let yourself sit there and be there, is that you'll find that you're no longer just a visitor. You're no longer just an observer taking in an amazing place. You start to feel that you belong. You start to feel that you're part of that mountain, you're part of that ocean. It's home. It's where you feel your aliveness. And you start to feel that forest inside of you. It's like, you know, the feeling of finding a long lost family that you've been searching all your life for, and then you've found them again right here in the ocean, right here on that mountaintop, right here out in the field of wildflowers. And they, not only do you recognize them as you're my family, but they recognize you as part of them. You start to become part of the forest. Yes, you see a note in the chat about braiding sweetgrass. It's an amazing book. So you and I are being called back from separation into conscious oneness with our glorious planet that we call the Earth. It's like returning to the Garden of Eden. As you feel that oneness, you'll naturally want to give back to the planet, and you'll naturally want to protect her, our home, and part of you, and you part of her, family. As we return to that conscious oneness, we'll not only survive as a species, but we'll be reborn with the aliveness that can only come from interconnection and oneness, not separation. Many blessings.
May we never lose our wonder. 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 Wide-eyed and mystified, may we be just like a child, staring at the beauty of it all. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder. 'Cause you are beautiful in all your ways. You are beautiful in all your ways. You are beautiful. And you fascinate us. You fascinate us. You fascinate us with your love. You fascinate us. You fascinate us with your love. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose